Okay guys and girls, you are probably wondering why you didn't get to vote on this week's Friday feature video. Well, last week you chose poorly. I wanted to talk about twin sets, so I made the decision for you this week. I'm just kidding. Shaun's actually off this week for holidays, and we actually filmed this one ages ago so that he could, edit it before he left. So scuba diving has been around for a few years now, and a lot of it is thanks to old school diving TV shows. The underwater world was huge in the 50s and 60s and inspired a generation to get in the water and swim downwards. After the 70s and 80s, the diving shows dried up a little bit, but today we're going to be looking back at the coolest scuba diving TV shows. And there have been a few. We used to have episodes of SeaHunt playing through a porthole in the dive center I used to work on, and yeah, that was just the nuts.
You're so cool.
SeaHunt is the daddy of all scuba diving TV shows. Filmed in black and white from 1958 to 1961, SeaHunt had 4 seasons that followed Lloyd Bridges as former US Navy frogman Mike Nelson. Nelson was a freelance scuba diver for hire and found himself in all sorts of adventures. As an expert diver, Nelson did a lot of search and recovery dives, rescuing trapped divers, scientific analysis, and he even recovered a nuclear bomb. Continuity wasn't its strongest selling point at times. I remember watching one episode where Nelson actually enters the water with twin cylinders. He then swims to a wreck on triple cylinders, and then he's cutting into the wreck on a single cylinder. But what SeaHunt did do is introduce the new audience to scuba diving as an adventurous hobby more than just a scientific method. A few similar shows like Assignment Underwater tried riding the waves of scuba diving adventures, but they didn't last all that long. Jacques Cousteau was the first to bring scuba diving to the public in colour. The non-fictional documentary showed the world all sorts of underwater life that many had never seen before. Debuting in 1966, Cousteau and his crew sailed the Calypso around the world, exploring and looking for new species and testing experimental diving techniques for 10 years up until 1976. While fascinating to watch, the undersea world can be a little hard to watch in this modern age, as some of their techniques were quite barbaric and character stereotypes unsensitive to today's standards. But you can still watch the pioneering aquanauts from the early stages of diving. Diver Dan was a kids' TV show in 1960 and followed the titular diver and puppet fish in their adventures. Diver Dan and the mermaid Miss Minerva interacted with the talking fish and 2 antagonists, Baron Barracuda and his dumb sidekick Trigger, who always had a cigarette in his mouth.
Trigger's the best.
Somehow, I presume it was never lit, but he was a bad guy, so he had to smoke, didn't he? By filming through an aquarium with real fish inside, the filmmakers produced the effect of Dan and the puppet fish being underwater. The evil fish Baron Barracuda has a super strong Dracula impression going on and wears a monocle, so you know he is legit evil. Simple humour, Diver Dan is quite funny to watch today and arguably better than a lot of kids programs today. The narrator started and ended the show with a song that could sometimes get quite dark. At the end of one episode in which Dan gets caught by an octopus and then blinded by its ink, ends with this little song. The secret weapon turns out to be an ink so black that no one can see. Diver Dan must fight in the deepest gloom, or else the ocean will become his tomb. Some say Diver Dan influenced SpongeBob SquarePants with their fish design, and there are actually a few hidden Easter eggs in the show too. Sealab 2020 was an animated show that followed a team of underwater scientists and their aquatic friends living in the underwater research center Sealab. Commanded by Captain Michael Murphy, Sealab was home to 250 men, women and children and was dedicated to the exploration of the seas and the protection of marine life. The expected complications troubled the crew in their normal day-to-day life, such as underwater earthquakes and of course giant squid attack. Yeah. The show only aired 13 episodes, but it did have a longer parody show on Adult Swim called Sealab 2021 in 2001. The parody lasted 4 seasons and was a less serious interpretation, with its origins in just redubbing the original show. You can see a lot of influences towards the modern show Archer in Sealab 2021. Descending is a more modern show from 2012 that followed Scott Wilson and Ellis Emmett diving around the world. They were previously involved in a couple other travel documentaries, Don't Forget Your Passport and Departures, but Descending was all about scuba diving around the world. For 13 episodes, the crew visited a new place to dive every episode and has some fantastic visuals and looked at the top side of diving, remote locations as well as the underwater side of things. It didn't last very long, sadly, but it was well edited and had some amazing annotations, so it's definitely worth a look. So there were a few of our favourite diving TV shows, not films, but let us know what your favourite diving shows that you like to watch are and why. Let's discuss down below. Thanks for watching and safe diving. We are an online dive store serving the UK and the world for all your diving equipment needs. So why not visit us at simplyscuba.com or click the box on your screen.